Cause of death, acute competitive depletion, complicated by perimeter hemorrhage, star dependency, and broom-related blunt force trauma. This is the postmortem for the 2025-26 Philadelphia 76ers. The first thing in the file is this. They weren't nothing, and that's important, because the ending was so ugly it almost tries to rewrite the season backwards. A sweep can do that to you. A 30-point elimination loss at home can make every previous good thing look like evidence planted at the scene. But the Sixers, they escaped the play-in. They beat Orlando. They really did. They entered the real bracket, and then they looked at the number 2 seeded Boston Celtics. You know, the old ghost, the bully. It's a franchise-shaped migraine headache. They didn't just inconvenience them. They killed them. They killed the Celtics. They came back from 3-1 down, won Game 5 in Boston, Game 6 in Philly. Then they went back to Boston for Game 7 and turned the Celtics into a cautionary tale. That belongs in the report today, because this corpse wasn't a fraud. This wasn't a fake playoff team wandering into traffic with a laminated motivational quote. The Sixers had a pulse, they had nerve, and for a minute they had teeth, until the Knicks pulled every last one of them. The first symptom was mistaking survival for recovery. The play-in win told Philadelphia, okay, we're still alive. The Boston series told Philadelphia, maybe we're more than alive. Maybe we're dangerous. Maybe the years of Embiid playoff frustration and second-round strangeness and Boston trauma was all finally bending into something else. And for a week there, it was real enough. Joel Embiid got one of those postseason moments that can change the smell of a resume. Tyrese Maxey had burst. The building started to believe. Boston had the kind of collapse that didn't disappear when the offseason started. But surviving an emergency is not the same thing as being healthy. You can restart the heart and still have the organs failing. And that's what New York exposed. The Celtics series drained Philadelphia emotionally. It took execution, desperation. It took the whole nervous system. Then the Knicks arrived and asked the less romantic question. Do it again. Not against the Celtics. Do it against us. Defend the arc, match our legs, find the shooters, handle Brunson. Keep Towns from stretching the floor open, and survive the second action after the first one already hurt you. Keep functioning after the story stops helping you. The Sixers couldn't. Once that became clear, the series stopped feeling like a contest and started feeling like a procedure. The second symptom was perimeter hemorrhage. New York didn't just beat Philadelphia from the outside. New York opened the wound, widened it, and kept checking to see if anyone in a Sixers uniform remembered where they put the gauze. Game 1 was a 39-point detonation, not a warning shot. That was a diagnosis. Game 2 was a cruel one because it gave Philadelphia the illusion of traction. The Sixers were close enough to pretend they could turn the series. Close enough for hope to put its shoes back on. Then the Knicks won anyways. Game 3 in Philadelphia was 108-94, and here's where the temperature changed. The crowd didn't sound shocked anymore. It sounded like it was reading a bill. Then Game 4 arrived, and the Knicks didn't just close the series. They repossessed the building, 144-114. An elimination game at home, 30 points, 25 Knicks threes. That's not a normal playoff death. That's blunt force spacing trauma. Miles McBride got comfortable. Jalen Brunson kept the machine organized. Karl Anthony Towns helped stretch the floor until Philly's defense looked less like a system and more like 5 men trying to remember who was supposed to bring the ladder. And New York did this without OG Anunoby. That's the mean part. The Knicks weren't even whole. Still, they made the Sixers look like they were defending with outdated software. You don't need a corner for this film. You need a mop, a receipt, and maybe one of those little signs that say, caution, wet floor. Except the floor is just Philadelphia's dignity leaking through the grout. And yes, Philadelphia had just watched this happen to the Flyers. That part's absurd enough to feel made up and miserable enough to be Philadelphia. The Flyers got swept by Carolina on Saturday night. Overtime, season over. The Sixers get swept by New York on Sunday. Blowout, season over. 2 Philadelphia teams, 2 consecutive days, 2 brooms. That's not a sports weekend. That's a sanitation schedule. And the ugly symmetry is that neither team gave the fans a clean mercy of being irrelevant. The Flyers had reintroduced themselves as a real playoff team, and the Sixers crawled out of the play-in, climbed over Boston, and briefly made the whole thing feel possible. Then both seasons got bagged and tagged before the weekend was done. Progress wasn't erased, but it got insulted. The third symptom was star dependency with diminishing returns. Joel Embiid was not the reason Game 4 collapsed. He went 8 for 8, scored 24 points. He gave Philly some real offense while a lot of the roster was busy turning into toilet paper. But that's also the old Sixers problem wearing a newer jacket. When Embiid is good, the Sixers can look credible. When he's great, they look dangerous. And when he's heroic, they can look like they're about to rewrite something. But when the opponent turns the game into a full roster audit, speed, spacing, movement, shooting, second effort, defensive recovery, bench contribution, emotional stamina, Philadelphia too often looked like a team asking 1 or 2 players to drag the whole franchise out of a ditch. Maxey had his moments, but not enough clean control. Paul George, I think he was too quiet. The supporting cast didn't change the weather, and against a Knicks team with movement, confidence, and enough shooting to turn defensive mistakes into public records, the Sixers looked less like a contender and more like a team hunting for the emergency manual after the room was already on fire. This is where the Boston series becomes both the crown jewel and the trapdoor, because beating Boston, that was real. Coming back from 3-1 was real. Embiid getting over that Game 7 wall, that was real too. But it also gave Philadelphia a dangerous temporary diagnosis. It made the patient look healthier than the lab said. Boston was the ghost they needed to beat. New York was the body they needed to survive. And they couldn't survive it. They got processed by it. Symptom number 4 was emotional oxygen loss. By the end, Philadelphia didn't look just beaten. It looked empty. There's a difference. A beaten team is angry. It fouls harder, it snaps at the ball, and talks itself into nonsense. It tries to create one final shove out of pure spite. An empty team gives you late closeouts, dead possessions, and that quiet bench camera look where the story's already written itself, even before the horn finishes the paperwork. That was the Sixers in Game 4. The Knicks fans got louder, the Sixers got smaller. The threes kept landing, and every make felt less like a shot and more like another item being removed from the house before the bank changed the locks. So the official ruling, Philadelphia 76ers died of acute competitive depletion, complicated by perimeter hemorrhage, star dependency, and broom-related blunt force trauma. Time of death, Game 4, Eastern Conference semifinals, when New York's 3-point avalanche turned Philadelphia's home floor into neutral territory, then hostile territory, then evidence. But the eulogy can't just be 4 games long, because the Sixers had a pulse this year. They had a play-in escape. It had the Celtics series. It had that old Philadelphia moment where pain briefly became business handled. And for a few days, they weren't just surviving the bracket. They were changing the story. And that's why this death is frustrating instead of hollow. There was something here. Not enough, but something. So the Sixers didn't win the East, and they didn't reach the conference finals. They didn't answer the old questions about Embiid, health, depth, balance, or whether this era can ever become more than a brilliant, recurrent argument with a second-round ceiling. But they did beat Boston. They got up off the floor and gave their fans one real postseason exhale before the Knicks took the air back out of the room and charged them for the oxygen. Philadelphia lost 2 teams in 2 days. The Flyers went first, swept in overtime. The Sixers followed, swept in a blowout. That's funny if you're not from Philadelphia, but it's brutal if you do. Philadelphia, you can bet they care. That's the disease and the gift. That city doesn't do casual grief. It takes the loss home. yells at it, feeds it, gives it a parking dispute, and waits for next year with its claw clenched hard enough to crack the sidewalk. So bury the Sixers, but don't bury them as nothing. Bury them as a team that escaped the play-in, rose up, killed Boston's season, and then ran out of blood against the next team that was bigger in the moment, fresher in the legs, cleaner in the math, and much colder with the knife. Final diagnosis, not fraud, not meaningless, and not dead from birth. The Sixers were a patient who survived the first emergency, won the dramatic middle act, then expired during the second surgery because the staff ran out of answers and the bleeding never stopped. The chart is closed and we enter the broom into evidence. Thanks for watching.